On Monday, the 10th of February, Vince Neal's Lear 35 Alpha, a 1989 model Lear, crashed at Scottsdale about 2:30 in the afternoon when the left main gear failed on landing. The left main gear failed right at the top of the gear strut where it basically attaches to the wing. There were 4 people on board the aircraft. The pilot sitting in the left seat of the Learjet was fatally injured. Vince Neal was not on the aircraft. His girlfriend, Rain, was on the aircraft and did sustain some form of injuries. My name is Juan Brown. You're watching the BLANCOLIRIO channel. Here's what we know so far about this. One person, presumably the co-pilot, was trapped in the airplane for some time, and according to local responders, one of the engines continued to run for a long time after the accident. Fortunately, there was no post-crash fire. The jet that the Lear ran into was parked, a Gulfstream 200 parked in front of Southwest Jet Center. The very busy airport here at Scottsdale is located just north of Phoenix, has a single runway 21 and 03, about 8,249 feet long. The Southwest Jet Center is located right about here at the midfield. The Learjet was landing on runway 21. The collision occurred right here in front of the Southwest Jet Center, and according to locals familiar with the situation down there, it was fortunate that the Lear was stopped by the Gulfstream aircraft and prevented the Lear from careening further on into the lobby of the Southwest Jet Center. Reviewing the preliminary video captured by the security camera, it appears that it was the failure of the left main gear leg that caused the accident. It's not a matter of the left main gear failing after the aircraft began to slide off the runway, but it was the failure of the landing gear that began the whole sequence of events. A quick look at the ADS-B data on ADS-B Exchange. It looks like this was a visual approach as the Learjet worked its way around the mountains surrounding Scottsdale in for the visual to runway 21. And if we look at the last couple of data points here, first off, the reference speed, the VREF, the approach speed looks good here, 118, 112 knots, 115 knots. That's about the correct approach speed. But let's look at these altitudes and descent rates. This data, it looks like 1,500 feet is going to be about the equivalent of the elevation of the aircraft when it's on the ground at Scottsdale. So take that into account when we look at this preliminary data. But what I want to focus on is this over here on the left. The descent rate right here at these last couple of data points. Just short of the freeway, 896 feet per minute, 960 feet per minute at 139 knots, 1,280 feet per minute at 134 knots, 1,400 feet per minute at 129 knots. So the speed control is good, but the rate of descent, 1,700 feet per minute. That is not a stabilized approach. That's too steep. You should have your descent rate arrested to at least 1,000 feet per minute or less, even in a hot little Lear 35. 1,200 feet per minute, 1,200 feet per minute, coming up right up onto final here, 700 feet per minute, 1,000 feet per minute right to the end, and then beginning the flare round out and landing. And we can't tell from the surveillance video just how hard of a landing this was, if this even was a hard landing. We also need to know, or investigators are going to have to figure out, at what point did the aircraft touch down on the runway. Now, if we take the KML data and drop it into Google Earth here, we can see the flight originated all the way out of Florida with a fuel stop in Texas before proceeding all the way to Scottsdale. So crew fatigue and crew duty day will be reviewed by the investigators. As we look at a more oblique view of the data as they work their way around the mountains on this visual approach into Scottsdale, remember you want a 3-to-1 approach path coming into the runway. So at 3 miles out from the end of the runway, you should be at 1,000 feet. And then you do that same ratio all the way in. So at about 3 miles out here, he's at about 1,000 feet above the ground. So right back here, the aircraft is on approach profile, but coming in here a little bit closer, you can see the aircraft balloons a bit above the desired profile. right in here. So the aircraft gets above profile and then has to descend rapidly back down to get on profile, producing those high rates of descent, a slightly unstabilized approach. Of particular interest to investigators is going to be this photograph circulating on social media showing previous damage to the left main landing gear, apparently in a landing incident somewhere in Arkansas. And here we can see the left tire looks shredded or flattened. The landing gear door is off of the landing gear, and we see fluid leaking out of the landing gear as well. Keeping these older Learjets or these older airplanes in airworthy condition is a challenge to owners. They're usually typically inexpensive to purchase, but very expensive to own and maintain. And investigators are going to want to look closely at the logbooks and the history of the maintenance of the left main gear on this particular aircraft. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here.